Hello everybody. So I titled this video Bloodbath Rant, but this is not really a rant. You all know what I'm going to be talking about, the same thing as everybody else right now. The markets are in turmoil. The Nasdaq is down between 4.8 and 5% depending on the hour. The market is having a panic attack. So I have 5 points that I want to make, and I'm going to try to go to a point. Point number one is the market is having an absolute panic attack. It keeps the nonsense. It makes absolutely no sense. Point number one here, for example, NVDA, Broadcom, they make semiconductors. Semiconductors are exempt from the tariffs. Additionally, if you look at a company like NVIDIA, it's mostly an IP company. It's mostly an asset-light company. They only have 30,000 employees. They have everything done by third parties, including Taiwan Semi. Yet it is down insanely right now, even though they are exempt. Point number one. Point number two, Amazon. And about a little bit of Amazon today. Amazon, I was not aware, was just like Shein or just like TEMU. Amazon scored a huge win yesterday, a huge win, which is the removal of a de minimis exemption. The main reason why DHgate, AliExpress, Shein was taking some business away from Amazon was the de minimis exemption, which allowed them to ship items up to, I think it was $800 or something, to the US without any tariffs. So the Amazon or whoever sells clothes through regular channel has to pay tariffs, but the de minimis exemption made it so that you could ship straight from China to the US, right, on these platforms like TEMU and Shein. And sure, I assume some of them shipped on Amazon, but most of that stuff is not bought on Amazon. Most of that stuff was bought on TEMU. And to show you how much of a nonsense this is, and this is really, in my view, the proof that this is the US market selling off, money managers hitting the sell button, is you have a company that's greatly impacted by that, called Pinduoduo, the owner of TEMU. Pinduoduo is losing the de minimis exemption. This is a huge deal to Pinduoduo. By the way, in Europe, they're talking also about removing the de minimis exemption, which means that Pinduoduo will not be able to sell their stuff straight from China to Europe and straight from China to the United States. If that's gone, that's a major blow to Pinduoduo. The stock is only down 5%, less than 5%. The stock is down less than 5%. Amazon, when I bought Amazon this morning, it was down 9.5%. This is complete nonsense. I'm just not going to say anything, but I really wonder what's the IQ of market makers. Index funds are nuts, and you know, mark my words, we can talk about it maybe in 10 or 20 years, but Jack Bogle and the thing that he pushed on the market is just killing price discovery, right? And the Vanguard index fund way, S&P is the only way, is leading to these movements of companies that should not move on this, or that should move in different directions. It's like, you know, you saw, anyways. Moving on, I want to make this rant quick, but it's kind of pointless. Like it's crazy. These stocks are dropping just because risk on, risk off, market's good, market's bad. That's literally the level of thinking of the market. That's literally the level of IQ. I cannot distinguish enough. NVIDIA does not have tariffs. Okay, they are semis. Semis are exempt. Okay, it's a secular growth. They're predicted to grow 90% year over year. This is secular. This is not classic economics. This is Austrian economics. People buy the product because they need the product for their innovation. Anyways, moving on to point number two. My point number two is I'm officially again calling Bitcoin a stablecoin. It's a joke, but not really, because actually, when you look at the performance of Bitcoin, I would argue Bitcoin has gone up. It's gone stronger compared to the rest of the market. Think of Bitcoin like an $80 stock. Imagine you saw Bitcoin today, and it's a stock, and it's an $81.80 stock, and a month ago, the stock was 85. It was $85 a month ago. Now it's 81. Would you even register that? No, you wouldn't. Like, you would likely would not even register the value change. And so Bitcoin and Bitcoin derivatives, as known as Bitcoin stocks like MSTR, like the miners. Well, the miners a little less, but it's a special case. They're looking more and more like safe havens to me. And let me just show you some of these 1 month performance data. So you can see Bitcoin is up 1%, while the S&P is down 3%. Okay, let's compare to the QQQ. Let's be more fair. Let's compare to a growth company. The QQQ is down 4% over 1 month, while the Bitcoin is up a nice 1%. If you annualize that's a minus 50% annualized return for QQQ versus 14% annualized return for Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's looking really, really good right now. And look at MicroStrategy, which is of course a derivative built on top of Bitcoin. Bitcoin powers the MicroStrategy company. It's the first company operating on a Bitcoin standard, as Saylor says, and I think rightly so. MicroStrategy is up a cozy nearly 25%, while Bitcoin is up 1%, but the Nasdaq is down 4%. So I'm officially calling the performance of Bitcoin really good, and it's to me it's looking more and more like a stable coin. And as you know, Bitcoin and Bitcoin derivatives, well, right now is the highest part of my portfolio because Tesla's not doing too well. So it's really the biggest portion of my portfolio. It behaves like a stable coin. So it's good owning these assets, and this is no financial advice, of course, but I'm very happy about that. Point number 3, let's talk about macro. Let's talk about the macro consequences of today. Bad news is good news is bad news. You've heard me say that before. And so we have bad news today, which means that it's good macro news. The 20-year, people are buying bonds. They're running to bonds. They are buying bonds. They are not buying Bitcoin. They are buying bonds. They like bonds. The bonds are up. So the delta between the bonds and the stocks is like 5 to 6% delta today. The treasury yield, because the bonds are up, of course, the yields are down. Think about what that's going to mean for mortgages, for example. Right, and we know that the 10-year yield, and we know the yield typically precede the Fed. They typically move before the Fed. So the yield is actually going down. This is going to look really good for mortgages. Mortgages are about to get cheaper again if this continue. And the last thing I want to say about the macro consequences of today is the rate cuts. For June, of course, it was already looking good. To me, when I look at it, the odds are higher than 60% now. If this keeps going any more day, 1 more day or 2 more days, it seems to me like the rate cut for June is going to be firmly in the bag. No financial advice. But we are also near another rate cut for July. If you look at the way the Fed Watch tool moved today, so you can see yesterday the odds of a second rate cut after June, the odds of a July rate cut were only 39% yesterday. Today, they are 49%, those odds of a second rate cut. If this bloodbath continues, we might get another rate cut. So again, bad news is good news is bad news on this one. So if you're wanting to refinance, if you want a cheap rate, maybe you want the stock market to do bad. That will guarantee you a cheap rate. Anyways, as you know on this channel, big Bitcoin believer. The name of the channel is called Beat the Denominator. So I obviously don't think a geriatric committee should be in charge of the value of the money, but that's just my thought. This is a rant style video, so you'll forgive me for being bold on this one. Okay, let's talk about. Now, I think because half of my viewers are foreign, so I think this is going to draw some controversy, what I'm going to say. But I've said before, I'm consistent. I've said before, I still think Trump is all about the negotiation. It's all about the negotiation tactics. And Bill Ackman, to me, he had the best analysis today. He said, sometimes the best strategy in a negotiation is convincing the other side that you are crazy. Think about that quote. Sometimes best strategy is to convince the other side that you are crazy, right? And you see those memes on the internet all over, make the penguins pay. Well, you're probably doing a really good job at convincing the other party that you are crazy. And then Ackman points out that Trump is a transactional person. He just wants wins. He wants to win. He wants a nice picture with him and somebody signing the deal. That's why he was so mad at the president of Ukraine the other day for not signing the deal. Like it's like he's a very transactional guy. So the point is, if you call him and if you negotiate, you'll probably be fine, and you'll probably just have regular back-to-back tariff. I tax you 10%, you tax me 10%. The worst thing, and this is what Secretary Bessent said today, is the worst thing you can do is to just retaliate. Because if you retaliate, well, the U.S. will likely retaliate, and so this is like the whole tit for tat, maybe he started first, but if you continue, it's just going to escalate, and at the end of the day, you'll have a full-on fight. And do you really want to pick that fight with the United States, given the size of the market, given the size of the US consumer? I was looking at data about who buys stuff in the world, and it's something like 30 to 40% of the stuff is bought by the US consumer. And believe me, I understand that on a daily basis. The average house in America is so much bigger than the average house in Europe. It's not even funny. I'll get to that in a second. But the US overflows with stuff, so I don't have a problem looking at that. But it's about the consumer company. But anyways, back to Trump. Trying to stay on topic here. Sure, Trump is unique. Right, he's a very unique guy. He's a former TV reality star. I don't know how many years he was a TV reality star. Was it more than 10 years or something like that? That probably shapes your personality. He's got plenty of kids. Has been married 3 times, 2 divorces. He's got a look and hair that some people don't like, and they make fun of him. I understand that people do not like the way he speaks, do not like his style. I entirely understand that people do not like his presence. That's perfectly fine. But at the end of the day, I don't think he's that dumb. People say he's dumb. I don't think he's that dumb, because I just look at the facts, right? The talk is cheap. Okay, so you hear a speech, you may say, oh, he's dumb. Look at how he speaks. Talk is cheap. It's not a valuable signal. Look at what someone has accomplished, not at what someone says. And when I see what he has accomplished, well, he became the US president twice. And I can tell you, many people never thought he would ever be president both times, and he did it. And he became a billionaire 3 separate times, right? Real estate in the early days, then lost everything with a casino, then billionaire again with TV reality, and then, he remained a billionaire after that, but then he became a billionaire again on top of that with all of these post-presidency ventures, the Truth Social of the world, and all of these IPOs, etc. that he did. So 3 times you become a billionaire, 2 times you become a US president. I think there's very few people that are like that, and so when people think he's dumb, I would hold back. I would hold back on that thought. And of course, I give him more credit about economics than most people because of Bitcoin's endorsement. He has endorsed Bitcoin, which is a huge deal in my book. And it's a huge sign that you are going to be a believer of Austrian economics. If you endorse Bitcoin, if you believe in Bitcoin, you're a believer in Austrian principles of economics, which means that you're not a believer in tariff, which means that this is a negotiation. To me, Trump is a believer of Austrian economics, and of course, people make fun about the memes, etc. But that's, I'm very neutral on the matter. But all I can tell you is that the memes and all the stuff, that's just popular. That's popular day culture. Culture has changed, right? What was cool in the 80s and the 90s is considered boring today. And today, what's cool is when he was a candidate, he was saying they're eating the dogs, and then he was all over TikTok, all over the world, like more than 1 billion views of him singing they're eating the dogs, right? How many people are going to see that meme today, make the penguins pay, of Trump talking to penguins, trying to make them pay? That's the popular culture of the day. That's what is cool today. And he's connected to the popular culture, in my view, on this one, as much as I'm very neutral on these things. This doesn't make me laugh. It doesn't make me cry either. That's the way the world is. Point number 5. And I want to talk about the foreign stuff here, the foreign media, etc., and domestic media too. But I don't like most Americans. I'm not American yet this summer. But anyways, like most people living in the U.S., I don't have TV. So two-thirds of Americans don't have TV. So I have no idea what the domestic media is saying in the U.S. But sometimes I will go and I will watch French news. Sometimes this is like the leading French news. This is like the French CNN, and they're saying today, like this. I took this screenshot today, like 30 minutes ago. They're saying, the Trump tariffs. Is that gonna be really freedom, like Trump called it, or is that gonna be ruin? And she's arguing here that it's gonna be insane ruin for the United States to put tariffs. And I can only assume if every single media around the world is saying that there's gonna be ruin in the U.S. because of tariffs. I can assure you we're fine. We're entirely fine. There's not gonna be ruin because of tariffs, and this manufactured negativity is very annoying to me. There's not going to be ruin because of tariffs. And first of all, some people try to sound smart, and they talk about the Smoot-Hawley Act, right, and the smooth holidays of the 1930s. In the 1930s, most of the GDP was stuff. The US was a stuff-driven economy. We are not in a stuff-driven economy. My college days are rusty, but the US GDP is how much of that is manufacturing? How much of that is stuff? Literally nothing. Literally nothing. Maybe 16%. Perhaps way less now. So the most Americans don't make money with stuff, right? Stuff is not essential to the US economy. It's essential to the Chinese economy, but it's not essential to the US economy. The US is a service/digitally driven, technologically driven economy, and it's about to be even more of that economy as we introduce more and more machines. That's point number one. So drawing the reference of Smoot Hawley to today is entirely crazy, because in Smoot Hawley, everything was stuff. Today, we spend our days in the digital world. We spend our days on our phones. It's not stuff anymore. It's digital contents. The biggest companies in the world do not make stuff. I mean, you could say Apple does, but they mostly don't if you add them up. Point number one, service economy, tech economy. Point number two is, and people make fun of Trump when he refers to the Gilded Age. He doesn't call it the Gilded Age or in the Belle Epoque age. But, that's this whole era of 1870 to 1910. And he's saying, it was such a prosperous era because of tariffs. I would argue personally it was a prosperous era because of innovation and the crazy innovation we had. But he's not wrong to say that this was a prosperous era. And I believe we're going to get back into this era anyways because of all of the innovation we're getting. That's point number two. And lastly, and I'll make this one, perhaps a little controversial. I don't know. I don't really care. It's a rant video, but it's like, So what goods from China are going to increase? Americans are stuff rich. Like you literally have an entire industry which is dedicated to storing your stuff in storage unit. I was comparing the price, because I have a storage unit myself. I was comparing the price of storage units between the US and in France. It's dirt cheap to have a giant storage unit in the US because literally Americans overflow with stuff. Look at the statistics of people who don't even use their garage because their entire garages are full with stuff. If a piece of stuff is a little too expensive, the odds are your parents have the stuff to give you. I cannot tell you how many things my friends have given me because they're just getting rid of them, right? The US is a stuff-rich country, and this is understandable because there's like 40 years of trade between both countries. There's no such thing as someone who actually, needs clothes in the United States. You probably have 10 or 20 exemplaries of clothing. You just want a new style, right? So I'm not trying to derive too much onto something else. The country's stuff rich. We're going to be okay if this lasts a few weeks. I guarantee you we're going to be okay if this lasts a few weeks. And even if you look at consumables, I don't know, like wine. Well, I don't know. Maybe we grow wine in Texas. Maybe the wine industry would be very happy in Texas to have some wine. Maybe we don't buy coffee. Maybe coffee is going to come from Hawaii or something. I actually visited some farmers in Hawaii for coffee. They don't have a lot of business. Maybe they'd be very happy about that. The point is it's temporary. The point is what I'm trying to say is it's temporary. And I don't think this is the long-term stuff. I think this is a negotiation matter, and I'll conclude with this one, and Europeans should be happy about that, because Europeans argue, well, that's not fair. The number that Trump was talking about in his numbers includes VAT. And Trump is saying, well, really, U.S. goods that are sold in Europe are being unfairly disadvantaged because of VAT. And I know in France, VAT is 20%. I don't know how much it is in the rest of Europe. Probably changes from country to country. And so that's Trump's points to include VAT. And okay, sure, it's not entirely fair because Europeans pay VAT on European goods too. But wouldn't that be funny? And wouldn't that be interesting if actually Trump got the VAT to drop in Europe? Because I've always found shocking the sales tax in VAT is slightly different, but you get what I mean. I've always found it very shocking the amount of quote-unquote sales tax in Europe, right? At 20%, you're not quite, but almost 4 times more expensive than the USA. And Texas has a high property, we have a high property tax too, but we have a high sales tax in Texas. There are states in the US US that have a lower sales tax than 6.2. That's the sales tax in Texas, 6.2. France is 20%. That's how you end up with most stuff, aside from some idiosyncrasies of the US, like healthcare and education, for the most famous. Most stuff in the US ends up being much cheaper because right off the bat, we don't have to pay the 20%. So wouldn't that be interesting if this debate actually triggered a debate in Europe about whether 20% sales tax is actually fair to the citizenry over there? Because frankly, if Europe is an expert in taxes, the US is not, so of course he's upset about the VAT, but I understand it's not entirely fair, but negotiation is negotiation. To quote Ackman, sometimes the best strategy in a negotiation is convincing the other side that you are crazy. And I will conclude this with this statement. So anyways, this was not financial advice, not investment advice, not stuff advice, no advice of any kind. This is just entertainment, bring you entertained. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Have a wonderful day and thank you for watching.